Alrighty, so the final game in terms of this mini match week where we have all five of these games happening yesterday and then today during the international break is in the books. And I think the theme in terms of looking at these five games, or at least in some of these games, is finishing or lack of it too, because we have seen a couple of these games doing this five-game action where the home team absolutely dominate the stats category and they don't get the win at the end of the game. And that kind of set it up in terms of talk about the first game, because the first game kind of fit that theme between DC versus the San Jose Earthquakes, where this game ended in a 0-0 draw. But for DC, they feel like they should have won this one. And honestly, this is going to be a game that I won't be surprised if DC does not make it to the playoffs this season. They're going to look back at this one because they had all the chances in terms of putting the ball into the back of net. And partially the fact that, the Quakes, this is not the first time I've seen them do this on the road where they just pretty much hope and pray that they can get a point or get all 3 points on the row. And what's kind of weird about the Quakes is that they kind of did that in the beginning of the season and it just does not work whatsoever. And yet somehow in some way here in the second half of the season they do this, and most of the time that they've been able to be successful to at least get a point out of this game. Now, early on, Espinoza did puts it high and wide from close range before Santos would put it wide in the near post. Kutibietro then just missed wide as he was trying to poke one in, and then Birnbaum would hit it right to Daniel in the 17th minute. As I thought DC started to create some good chances and was looking for the opening goal. Bono then denied Ibobosi, but it fall right to Espinoza, who puts it high from close range. And as much as the Quakes were pretty much dominated in the last 30 minutes of this game, they also had some chances to get the opening goal in this one, especially Christian Espinoza. I mean, of how hot he's been for the Quakes, and really at time the only true goal scorer for this team. It was kind of surprising that he wasn't able to put away some of the chances that he has, and this was one of those one. He then missed wide from close in the 26th minute before Daniel would tip Dahome shot over. Then he denied Benteke from close range in the 37th minute. And you just feel like this opening goal was definitely up for grabs for both of these teams. There's been chances on both ends of getting the opening goal. And then Espinoza had no chance here. He puts it wide from close range. Again, found some space there on the right side. And that, again, with the form that Espinoza has been in, you would think that he would at least bury one of these chances. But we do head to halftime with this game scoreless heading into the second half. Now, in the second half, it looked like DC got the opening goal as Perini thought that he scored his first career MLS goal, but unfortunately, VAR does not agree with him as they go to VAR to see whether or not if Perini came back from that position, and he was. So yeah, the goal was chopped off, and yeah, the Quakes were saved by VAR in this because doing this play, there was a lot of ball watching that was going on in the box there. It was poor defending there from the Quakes, but they got rescued because of VAR. But that didn't stop DC of trying to get the opening goal later on too. Kudivietro would hit one right to Daniel before he hits one right to Daniel in the 63rd minute. He definitely had a good game, Ted Kudivietro, and probably should have scored one in this one. But there was no doubt the momentum was with DC, and you just kind of had a feeling that, yeah, here we go again for the Quakes. It seemed like this is typical Luchi Gonzalez stuff where, I talk about road heat mode with Minnesota. It feels like Luchi Gonzalez has really adapted that tactics in terms of this season, because it is pretty clear that he is parking the bus again. It's Rohit Mo on full display here, trying to get out of this game with a point. Though Ibosi did hits the side netting in the near post before Daniel denied Click full stretch in the 70th minute, and I mean, wrote looked like Daniel is bailing this team out. I mean, I think part of the reason why the Quakes have at least miraculously able to get points on the road, despite the fact that they're clearly parking the bus, and how many times I've said that just does not work when you're the road team, is because of Daniel. I mean, Daniel has really been a guy that I don't think he's gonna get contention of winning goalkeeper of the year, because I definitely know that there are some very decent goalkeeper this season that's gonna get the award, but I think he's very underrated and just kind of an unsung hero for the Quakes this season. Again, I don't think I've seen a player that good for the Quakes in between the six than a certain guy called David Bingham that was between the stake for this Quakes team just a couple of years ago. But yeah, in the 75th minute, the post would then deny Benteke, and as that one bounced off the post, Rodriguez actually cleared that one off the line there. I mean, that moment I think just kind of sums up the game for DC. It just looked like it was not going to be their nights, and that it looks like the Quakes are again. They are just hanging on by a thread. But I also kind of had a sense that this Quakes plus is just hanging on an edge. They were living on a very thin rope with the way that they've been bailed out for VAR at first, and now because of the post. And then in the 89th minute, Tanner Beeson, of course, would get a straight red here after they go to VAR to see whether or not if his foul on DiPietro, DiPietro is worthy of denial goal score opportunity, and it was. And really, that came off a bad turnover for the Quakes. You just simply cannot do that. But yeah, Beeson, of course, got himself a red card. I mean, the only good news for the Quakes is that that did happen right near the end of the game. The bad news is we had 9 minutes of stoppage time. And really, as the time winds down, I mean, if you thought the Quakes were parking the bus before, they're now parking the whole depot right now. They're parking the whole depot right now. They're pretty much putting everybody back in the box while DC was throwing the kitchen sink for the winner and take advantage of that man advantage. Heinz Ike had a shot that was clear off the line in the 4th minute of stoppage time before Huan would had a shot that puts it high. And then, literally, as the final whistle was about to blown, there was a mad scramble in the Quakes box, and DC had at least 3 opportunity to put the ball into the back net, and yeah, they can. And in the end, as a result, it ends in a 0-0 draw in this one. The shots in this one, you can't really very clearly because I ran out of space because there was just so much action that happened down the line in this one. 24 shots committed, 13 that the Quakes had, 9 shots on goal committed, 2 that the Quakes had, 9 shots off target committed, 2 that the Quakes had, 3 shots that was blocked committed, 6 that DC had, and possession wise, believe it or not, possession was pretty even. 48% possession compared to 52% possession the Quakes has in this game. But like I said, for the Quakes, I mean, I don't know how they're getting away with this. If it really feels weird, the fact that it's kind of reversed trend compared to the beginning of the season, where these are kind of the games where they drop points, but they haven't done lately. And that, again, I've always said that this is unsustainable for this team, and yet they're still doing it. So I guess I'll take it. I mean, their form is still not very good right now. I think this is now 4 game winless for them, and in the home stretch that we're in, this team will need to start to get wins, especially at home. But getting a roll point is always a good thing for the Quakes. I mean, anytime when you get a roll point for the Quakes, it's just as rare as them getting home wins. So I think they'll definitely take it. And that they're probably very lucky that they escape with a point out of this game. But for DC, like I said, if they do miss out on the playoffs, and if Miami does pass them in terms of going above the playoff line, which seems like more and more likely it is going to be the case, this is going to be a game that they're going to look back because, every point matters. These 2 points drop is definitely going to be huge. That could come back to haunt DC later in the season. Speaking of Miami, so you know how when the season restarted, I think Miami was like 12 points behind the standings, and that there's question, can they make up that 12 points? And I even made a video talk about how there's a possibility that they can do so. One thing I did not factor in that video is talk about how they are basically missing almost their entire starting 11 when we get to the international break, and Messi, of course, is not available. So the question is, during these time when they don't have Messi available, can they still win the game? And the answer is yes. Though I will say that, Miami, they kind of had to hold on a little bit late in this one, as Sporting KC almost had a chance to get the equalizer in this one, though it didn't get off to a good start for Miami. In fact, just 9 minutes into this game, Danny O'Shaughnessy would get the opening goal for Sporting KC, and Drake Calendar actually was in goal for this game. Again, this is why I said back in the preview when I talk about all the players that's missing due to international duty, and how I said this is according to the league website, and I have a feeling some of them are probably going to be inaccurate, and this is one of them. Although I think the reason why they said that Drake Calendar was in this game was he was actually going to be part of the U.S. team when they play against Oman on Tuesday. He wasn't going to be part of the U.S. team when they play against Uzbekistan, so that's kind of weird that that is the case. But Miami wouldn't complain because Drake Calendar has been very big for them this season. But this was one of a rare moment of mistake from him. I mean, just a juicy rebound. He gave it right onto the doorstep of Shari, and Shari said, "Thank you very much." He puts it into the back of net, and it was 1-0 in favor of Sporting. Though not much happened besides the goal, though, in the 24th minute, the penalty was given to Sporting KC, and from one bad goalkeeping mistake to another bad goalkeeping mistake as Melia brought down Campana in the box. He didn't need to come off his lines there, Tim Melia, in terms of getting it, and because he didn't do a good job in terms of it, concede the penalty, and Campana, of course, wins the penalty. He was the one that takes the penalty, and he makes no mistakes of it as he ties the game up at one apiece here. Russell did look to try to respond, but it was missed wide. But then in the 45th minute, Campana would score. So, without Joseph Martinez in the starting 11, Leo Campana said, "Hey, I can score goals too." And he scored here from Yetlin and Farias to make it 2-1 in favor of Miami. It was a great header there from Campana, but you got to question the Sporting KC defense. I mean, there was a lot of ball watching that was going on when Yetlin crossed that one into Campana, but Miami wouldn't care. They were leading 2-1 heading into the second half. And in the second half, Campana was looking for his hat trick, but he was robbed by Milian. It wouldn't have counted either way because the flag went up. And Miami was on the front foot as they were looking for the third goal. Keep in mind, despite the fact that they are missing a lot of starters, there are still some good players on this Inter Miami team. I mean, guys like Farias is still in this team. Got guys like Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets is still in this team because both of these guys have long retired with the Spanish national team, and they definitely made a big impact in this game, especially Busquets too, because in the 60th minute, Farias would score from Busquets to make it 3-1 in this game, and this was just a heads-up play by Miami because they pretty quickly on the restart. Sporting KC was still complaining about the foul, and they just got completely caught off guard because of it. And as a result, it was 3-1 in this game. Again, that turns out to be a big goal because of what would happen in the last 30th minute. But it was almost 4-1 when Milian would rob Robbie Robinson as he done the whole Sporting KC defense, but he only was able to found Melia robbing him of a spectacular goal, and I think that just kind of sums up Robbie Robinson's career for Inter Miami. I mean, it's hard to believe that he's still with this team right now, and it sucks that has faced so much adversity for this team in terms of injuries and stuff, and this was a big moment for him to maybe get a goal and you kind of remember that. Yeah, he still played for Inter Miami, but yeah, just not meant to be. So in the 78th minute, Polito would score. He scored from Tommy to make it 3-2 in this one because of course Alan Polito would score for Sporting KC. He's been red hot for Sporting KC now. And then Agata would puts it wide from close range, and yeah, you can sense that there was some tension inside Drive Pink Stadium. You knew as the time winds down, it is all hands on deck. Miami was just trying to hold on to this 3-2 lead. Well, Sporting KC was pressing for the equalizer. Tommy would miss just wide from close range before Espinoza puts it high from long range. And then in the 6 minute stoppage time, Libo would hit one right to counter. And despite some furious pressure that Sporting KC put on Miami, Miami survived. They got a massive 3-2 win in this one, getting 3 points in this one, despite not having their GOAT in Lionel Messi in this game. But the shots in this one, 10 shots compared to 15 that Sporting KC had. Both team had 5 shots on goal, 7 shots off target, 2 that Sporting KC had. Both team had 3 shots on his block, and possession-wise, 54% possession compared to the 46% possession that Miami has. And with this win, Miami is only 6 points below the red line. And keep in mind, they still have 8 games left in the season. So again, this just shows you that they have wasted no time in terms of cutting down that deficit that they have to face, and this is why. And it just doesn't take much in this league, especially in terms of these standings that gets into the playoffs because team seems to be very inconsistent these days in terms of being above the red line, and we're seeing it right now where Miami is definitely making up some ground. And in some way, with them 6 points behind DC, keep in mind they still have 2 games in hand over DC, and that some of the teams that is above them, they still gets to play against a couple of those team above them. I believe they play against NYCFC, which is one of the team that is above them, and then in the final 2 games of the season, they play against Charlotte, and I think that could really determine the fate for Inter Miami to make it to the playoffs. But either way, I'm pretty sure that the league is trying their best to make sure that this team makes it into the playoffs because, again, if this team does make it to the playoffs, this is bad news if you're in the Eastern Conference because, while I talk about the Eastern Conference this season, who could be the favorites, and it could be a bloodbath because there are so many good teams. If Miami gets into that conversation, and with the way that Miami has really run the table, as what we saw in the Leeds Cup tournament, yeah, this is definitely bad news for a lot of those teams in the Eastern Conference. And do not be surprised if Miami does run the table, and we could see an unexpected the treble. I mean, as much as I know, Messi has really changed the culture of this team. If you would have told me that he would able to win the Leeds Cup tournament and potentially even win the U.S. Open Cup, and then win the MLS Cup and do an unprecedented treble, consider this team was dead and buried in July. Yeah, that has got to go down as one of the craziest turnaround I've ever seen an MLS team has done. But that's what happened when you have the greatest player of all time play for you, and that they're hoping that he can be back for this team as soon as possible. But for Sporting KC, this is a devastating loss. I mean, I talk about the Eastern Conference playoffs being tight. In the West, it's even more tighter. I mean, every point really matters for these teams that are just above or below the red line right now. And with the fact that some of these other teams are able to get wins, and Sporting KC come away with nothing, and especially a big opportunity here to get something. Consider they're not playing. They're one of the few team and the only team in ever since Messi was involved unveiled with Miami that they don't have to face against him, and this again huge missed opportunity for them to climb up the standings, and now teams behind them and in front of them also got points on them. For that being said, moving on in the next match, it's Minnesota and New England. So this game was probably one of the most infuriating, but also the most exciting draws I think Minnesota United has had this season, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this was one of those games where it feels like this season for Minnesota you get two different games. You get either a game where Minnesota are very clinical in front of goals, as we've seen them on the road, or you get a version where they are not clinical whatsoever and they have a bunch of chances but unable to put the ball into the back of the net. Then you also get a third version of the Loons this season, and that of course is a team that never say die, and somehow in some way still able to score some late goal magic to rescue a point or get a win, and that's exactly what we saw in terms of this game. Now, early on, Reynoso would puts it high from long range before Dotson would hit one right to Edward Jr. Unsurprisingly, Minnesota was on the front foot. They were looking for an early lead. Edward Jr. would then deny Taylor in the near post before Boxall would hit one right to Edward Jr. That would then miss just high from long range. Notice I wrote a lot of chances for Minnesota. Get used to this because they had a lot of chances in this one, probably the most that they have ever had this season in really in a very long time too. Dotson then hits it high from close in the 28th minute. It was just wave after wave of pressure, but the most important thing right now is the scoreline is still 0-0, and I just feel like looks like this is one of those games. Like it doesn't take me a lot to realize that I feel like yeah, this is gonna be that kind of a game for Minnesota that they're probably going to generate a lot of chances. But they have nothing to show for it because their finishing has been very poor at times this season. And I've seen this happen this season at home again. And I thought there also was a lot of corner that Minnesota has had. I think in the end they had 15 corners in this game, which I think that has to be close to a record for the most corner in a single game. Definitely a club record or two. They had so many corners in this game, yet really not one of them was even close to being threatening to this New England team, except the very last one that is. But in the 32nd minute, Gregush would puts it way wide from long range before Garcia would puts it wide from close. But then in the 38th minute, what happened when you of course don't take advantage of your opportunity? Well, you are definitely in danger of getting sucker punch, and Minnesota got sucker punch here because in the 38th minute, how about this? Carlos Gil scoring from Nacho Gil to make it 1-0 in favor of New England. I mean, I was waiting for this to happen. I've always seen some great brothers combination. We see the Brodons up in Seattle. We saw the Chars up in Portland. So now we get the Gil in New England as both Gil brothers combine here to score to make it 1-0 in favor of New England, and that was just completely against the run of play. Like that was really one of the first opportunity that New England has had the whole game. And then in the 40th minute, Harkswood puts it wide from close range before the post with denying Shankly from close in the 42nd minute. And all of a sudden, the momentum was with New England. Like, that's how quick things can change, and I can clearly see that this Loons team was completely rattled. Like they got caught in the sucker punch, and the heads immediately drop. And this is where I was thinking like they got to keep this at 1-0. Like you cannot afford to go down 2-0, and that it feels like it's I've seen this happen but before where they dominate a game and then they quickly find themselves 2-0 down and the game pretty much was done. But thankfully for them, they were able to head to halftime down 1-0, and they did regroup in the second half because they were trying to push for the equalizer. But that doesn't really matter for them because this is a team that is not a team that's do well in terms of having most of the possession. And I think teams are starting to realize that. Like, if if there's one way you can play against Minnesota, well, one, you hope that they hit one of those days where they just cannot finish. And two, just give them all the possession because this is a team that doesn't really do a good job in terms of breaking team down, unless if Reynoso, of course, go into nuclear mode, which we have seen happen this season too, and especially in the Leeds Cup tournament. But in the 57th minute, Longwane would hit it wide from close range. Longwane, of course, made his return. He definitely looked a little rusty in this one, which is expected coming back from an injury. But Edwards then denied Tajuri Shradi from long range in the 64th minute. I have no idea why Tajuri Shradi is not a regular starter now. Like this guy, every time he's on the pitch for this Minnesota team, he's been a difference maker. And I kind of knew that was the case because I think going back to his day with NYCFC, he's a guy that is a dynamic attacker for any team. And I also don't understand why LAFC decided to get rid of him. I mean, yeah, he had some injury concern, but when he's healthy, he is definitely one of the more underrated attacker in the league, and we're definitely showing it every time he's been stepping on the pitch for this Minnesota team. But you also see that the bus is currently being firmly parked for the Revs. It feels like the Revs are trying to take a page from Adrian Heath, going row Heath mode here, trying to hold on to this 1-0 lead. And Dane Sinclair had to deny Ismir in the near post. That came over the transition, which again, this is where Minnesota's got to be careful because when you push so many men forward, you don't want to get yourself caught on the transition. Longwane then was in on goal there in the 71st minute. He was trying to dink it over Edwards Jr., but it was clear off the line. And at that moment, I just had a feeling that yeah, they're not going to score a goal. Like that pretty much signaled that they're not going to score a goal because if they miss that kind of opportunity, then yeah, that's probably not going to go they're not going to score. In fact, it's now the post that is in the victim for the Loons in this one, as it denied Gregush on the volley. I mean, Gregush, he basically laugh as that one hits the post because he knows how. Yeah, you know it's not one of your day when even the post gets in your way. But Reynoso then puts it wide from long range, and the shots were now 22-7 for Minnesota. Like it was insane of how many shots that this team was getting, and yet they just cannot find one in. Tajiri Shradi then hits one right to Edwards Jr. before he puts it wide from close range. And just as you thought that this was probably going to end up to be the most infuriating loss that this Minnesota United team is going to get this season, in the third minute stoppage time, oh, MLS After Dark, you never disappoint. Fragapani would score from Dane Sinclair, of all players, to tie the game up at one apiece. And before you think, is that just a simple long ball that gets to Fragapani and he puts the ball into the back of the net? No. This is actually one of those moments where the goalkeeper came off his lines. This was the 15th corner for Minnesota. And while New England did do a good job at least temporarily clearing their lines there, they didn't really clear it halfway. There was Dane Sinclair still staying up there, and he got the ball. And, obviously you're thinking, well, is he going to shoot there? Because that would be a crazy moment if a goalkeeper decided to shoot in the dying embers of the game. But no, I'll give credit to him. He passed it right to Fragapani, and Fragapani just did enough to just bend that one into the back net there to tie the game up at one apiece. And yeah, I mean that is probably the most MLS After Dark goal you will ever seen. I mean, there is no league in the world like MLS that you have this kind of moment where a goalkeeper can come on to major. I've seen some goalkeepers that has been scoring great headers, but how many times you can say goalkeeper's been able to be a playmaker, set his teammate up, put it on a platter, and let them score? I mean, you just simply don't see that happen any day or in any league except for MLS. And yeah, that ties the game up at one apiece. That was also the final kick of the game, as in the end, in look what looked like was the most infuriating loss that Minnesota has had. They rescued themselves to get a point out of this game, as in the end the shot or they got a 1-1 draw, and the shots in this one 27 shots compared to 7 that New England has. That has to be the most shot a team has had and not get all 3 points in this game this season. 7 shots on goal for the 4 that New England has, 3 shots off target for the 14 that Minnesota has. Yeah, 14 shots off target by the Loons in this one. 6 shots that was blocked with none that New England has, and possession-wise, 59% possession compared to the 41% possession that New England has. And again, there's two ways you can look at this. If you're kind of a negative kind of Minnesota United fans, you would just say that, well, this is a knife draw this season, and they're still drawing way too many games, and that dropping points at home is not going to be enough for them to get to the playoffs. But if you want to be a more optimistic Minnesota United fan, you will say that getting that equalizer has to be huge, not only to salvage a point out of this game of what could have been a very infuriating game, but it definitely help the mental strength, and definitely will help that kind of belief in future game. Because imagine if they do lose this one, that would just be such a soul crushing loss to this team that can easily unravel a team. But getting that equalizer definitely will give the belief that, hey, against all odds, despite it was not one of our night, we somehow able to salvage a draw at the death, and that hopefully they'll carry that momentum heading into the next game. I mean, at the same time, I am still frustrated the fact that this is a team that still has the second fewest home win, and that again, there's just way too many they draw. Like this season for Minnesota, their struggle at home is not because they lose a lot of games. They've drawn way too many games, like 9 times that they drawn this season. They have drawn more than half of the games that they have played this season. That's got to stop if they want to make it to the playoffs. Especially this is the first of 3 out of the next 4 that is going to be playing at Allianz Field. But for New England, second game in a row that they choked away a lead in stoppage time. And to make matters worse, it's now announced right after the game, Bruce Arena has officially resigned from his post with the New England Revolution. And again, we still don't know the whole situation about him, and that I think will never know, because again, you talk about some of the weirdest situation that has gone on, something that we just have no idea how this has unraveled. This is simply the case for this Bruce Arena scandal. I mean, all we have heard that there's allegation that he might have used some racial slur or some abusive language towards someone, but again, we just don't have the full detail of it. And until we don't get the full detail of it, it's still a big mystery of what exactly what is going on this team. But either way, I feel like that started to take a toll on this New England team, because I'll give credit to this New England team. They have fought really hard this season to be in the spot that they are, but eventually that adversity is going to take a toll, and I think in these last couple of games you're starting to see it too. And it also doesn't help with the fact that injuries are also starting to take a toll. Like, if you want to talk about a team that has been just so snake bitten for injuries, this is probably one of the team that is that just so many players that is currently out for this New England team. But that being said, moving on into the next game is Portland and LAFC, and this is a game that I think if you're a Portland Timbers fan, you would say that this might be the game that saved their season and maybe keep their hope of making the playoffs. Although again, when they do make it to the playoff, there's still a lot of question whether if they're actually even going to do anything once they get there. But at least if in terms of making a dance, this is definitely a game-saving one, because they had to win this game against LAFC. Yes, LAFC have played relatively well this season, but you got to remember this is a little short-handed LAFC team. No Denise Bawanga in this one, and they dearly miss him in this one against the Timbers. Early on, Moreno would puts it wide from close before Evander would puts it high from long range. The Timbers were on the front foot. They were looking for the opening goal, and they get it in the 28th minute. It's Mabiala. He scored here to make it 1-0 in favor of the Timbers. But yeah, for McCarthy, this is definitely not a moment he want to look back. I mean, he came off his line here. Anytime when you're a goalkeeper and you're trying to punch the ball away from a cross, you have to get it. Because if you don't get it, you are in no man's land. And in this case, John McCarthy, he didn't get that punch. He completely missed that punch there, and it just fall into a precarious position where Mabiala was there. Basically heads it into the empty net, and yeah, that gives the Timber a 1-0 lead. Bogush did look to try to respond, but he curls that one wide before McCarthy did deny Moreno in the 44th minute. But we do head to halftime with the Timbers leading 1-0. In the second half, Mabiella would heads it wide from close range. So despite the fact that Mabiella has got had some rare minutes for this Timber side. That he definitely played his best game in this one. He almost had 2 goals in this one too. Bogusz then hits it wide from close range. I thought it was a lively start for both of these teams looking to get the next goal. And that next goal came just 1 minute later as it's Claudio Bravo that score here from Moreno to make it 2-0 in favor of Timber. So it's not very often you see both of the goals that are scored by a team to win the game are coming from defender. And again, another unlikely goal scorer, Claudio Bravo. You wouldn't think he would be the one that scored, especially coming off of a great team goal to from the Portland Timbers. Very well worked there to get them a 2-0 lead. McCarthy then denied Bravo from close range because now Bravo was feeling it after getting a goal just a couple of minutes late a couple of minutes ago, and definitely this Timbers team was feeling like they can get another. Though Palacios on the other end hits it straight to Bingham before Bingham had to deny Bogusz from close range. Vela then hits it wide despite having a free header. Yeah, that's one that Carlito would want to have back because you usually don't see Vela miss that opportunity very often. But there was no doubt that LAFC had got back into this game. They were pressing to get one back. The Timbers looked like they were reeling a little bit. Though on the other end, McCarthy would deny boldly on a lightning counterattack for the Timbers. I mean, the Timbers almost did their classic bread and butter there. Just because Giovanni Savarese is no longer with this team doesn't mean that they're not a lethal counterattack team too. McGraw then hits one right to McCarthy in the 77th minute before Vela would miss it high from long range. And really, as the time winds down, the Timbers were sitting on a low block. Like they were shutting up shop. They were trying to hang on to win this 2-0 thing, or hang on to this 2-0 lead. But they do. They win this one 2-0 to keep their playoff hopes alive. And the shots in this one, 10 shots for the 11 that LAFC had, 2 shots on goal for the 5 that the Timbers had, 4 shots off target for the 7 that LAFC had, 1 shot that was blocked for the 2 that LAFC had, and possession-wise, 61% possession compared to 39% possession that the Portland Timbers has in this game. So yeah, like I said, massive win for this Timbers team. I believe they're now just only 1 point below the red line, but keep in mind they've played 28 games this season, and that there are teams that is currently above the red line that does have a game advantage over the teams that is below the red line. But still, again, if there is a time for them to make a late second half season push, as we've seen the Timbers have done in recent years, it seems like this is kind of getting off to a good start, and we'll see whether they can continue that. But for LAFC, I mean, I know they're shorthanded in this one, but yeah, I mean, they have struggled in these last couple of games, and that keep in mind they're not actually that high up or that far away in terms of the red line right now. I mean, right now when you look at the standings, there's like I think only a 10-point gap between second all the way down to the second bottom standing in the Western Conference, and I think there's like a 5-point gap separating fifth all the way down to 12th place. It is very tight right now in the Western Conference, and if you go any team above the red line and they go for a funk and go for a losing streak and go for a collapse, they can easily fall below the red line. So yeah, for LAFC, they can't be comfortable even if they're 7 points above the red line as I think they are right now. If they start not picking things up in these next couple of games, they could found themselves in a position that they definitely don't want themselves to be in, which is right in the mush pit in terms of that fight for those precious playoff position in the West right now. That being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the last game and the game that just finished about an hour ago between the Galaxy and St. Louis City. So finally, moving on into the last game, and the game that just finished about an hour ago is the Galaxy and St. Louis City. And I think this is also one of those games where I don't think neither of these teams will be happy in terms of how the outcome of this resort is gonna be. I mean, for St. Louis, they were looking comfortable with a 2-0 lead, but then things kind of unravel for them in the second half. Albeit, St. Louis fans are also very upset in terms of very controversial call to happen in this game. Though they weren't upset in the 4th minute because in the 4th minute, Adeniran would score the opening goal to make it 1-0 in favor of St. Louis City. The Galaxy feel like Adeniran was in an offside position. Referee says no, and most importantly, VAR says no too. So yeah, dream start for St. Louis. They lead it 1-0. I thought despite the Galaxy had the possession early on, they really failed to create many chances. And at the back, I mean, it was gaps all over the field at the back for St. Louis too to exploit, especially when the ball was delivered into the box. Though Joveljic did head it wide, as that was really the first chance for the Galaxy in the 16th minute, and then Boy would hit one right to Berkey. Jovic would do the same thing in the 25th minute. Though the Galaxy, again, they started creating some half chances, started to get into this game, but, not much really, I think, trouble Berkey, despite them creating some half chances. Though in the 28th minute, St. Louis would make it 2-0. And it's Santa Claus scoring the goal. João Claus scoring from Jackson to make it 2-0 in favor of St. Louis. That came off of a lightning counterattack from St. Louis City, and really just one that the Galaxy just kind of fell asleep on in terms of not able to deal with that transitional play. But St. Louis wouldn't care. They would made it 2-0 in this one, and most importantly, it's got to feel good for St. Louis City fans to see João Claus getting back on the score sheet for the first time since he suffered that injury that kept him out pretty much half of the season. But 35 minutes in, the shots were only 4-2 for the Galaxy. But keep in mind, both of the shots that St. Louis has had is in the back of the net. And it was almost free for free, as in the 37th minute, Adanaran would score again. But the problem is, the flag did not agree with him, as the goal was disallowed for offside. And it was very, very close. Like, I think only the arm of Adanaran was the reason why he was in an offside position. But it was just way too easy for St. Louis to cut that Galaxy defense open. Like, that Galaxy defense, we talk about at times they have been having some problems this season, and it was kind of the case again in this game. Though Joveljic would then hits one right to Berkey in the 39th minute, and we head to halftime with St. Louis leading 2-0 against the Galaxy. Now, in the second half, they mentioned the Galaxy is 0-9-3 when they trail at the half, while St. Louis have won all their matches when leading at halftime. Obviously, that came to an end. But what is also not correct is they said that the Galaxy is 0-9-3 when trailing at halftime. That is incorrect. And the reason why I say that's incorrect is because I know in that Cali Clasico when the Quakes played against the Galaxy, Quakes were leading that one 2-1 at halftime. They lost that one. So yeah, whoever were creating the stats to the commentator, yeah, they probably should maybe do a little bit better research on that, because yeah, the Galaxy have able to come back. I think that's the only time that they came back, when they're down at halftime this season, but they're definitely not winless this season in terms of being down at halftime. Though in the 46th minute, Berkey would deny Boy from close range, and again the Galaxy were on the front foot, and why not? They were starting to pile on the pressure, looking to get one back, and they do get one back, though in a very controversial way, and this is where St. Louis fans really were angry about this moment, because a penalty was given to the Galaxy after VAR deemed that Adanaran handball in the box. And in some ways, I kind of do see why St. Louis fans are kind of upset about this, because again, this is a really tough one. Like, Adanaran, you can see that, the ball did hit him, and his hand was tucked in, and it's just one of those ones where, I mean, what can he do in terms of just kind of not have that ball hit his hand there? Does he need to turn his back and stuff like that? I mean, that's just it just feel like the only thing I can think of, maybe you could say that it's a handball, is not because of the original one that hit his right hand, but maybe the left hand that was kind of trailing a little bit. But either way, I thought that was harsh, and I do think that St. Louis fan does have some rights in terms of saying that of course is a that probably shouldn't have been a handball and a penalty for the Galaxy, but nevertheless, Ricky Puig takes the penalty and he buries it to make it 2-1 in favor of St. Louis. And keep in mind, Adanaran would get a yellow card because of that. That would come back to be a big thing, and also even a bigger thing, that another thing that make a lot of St. Louis fans not happy about how this game would play out. But in the 53rd minute, on the other end, Yoshida almost scored an own goal, as the Galaxy almost commit the classic Cardinal sin. I mean, there's an old saying, you're always the most vulnerable when you just score. And yeah, that was almost the case here. The Galaxy just completely switched off after they got that goal back, and St. Louis almost punished them. The shots were 9-3 for the Galaxy up to that point. They were pressing for the equalizer, and then in the 60th minute, they went up a man, because Adanaran would get his second yellow card in this game, and this is where we go back to the yellow card that Adanaran got earlier. That maybe probably shouldn't have been a yellow card. Maybe it shouldn't have a handball, and this definitely will not make St. Louis fan even more happier at the fact that Adanaran would get a second yellow. Though the challenge that he has no complaint about that. That is always a yellow card, and yeah. St. Louis were down to 10 men. Aldi would try to take advantage straight away, but he hits one right to Berkey before Pooch puts it just wide from long range, and the pressure was mounting. Like the Galaxy, they were inching closer and closer to the equalizer. St. Louis were clearly trying to hope that they can ride out of the storm that the Galaxy were pushing up on them. Fagundes would then hits one right to Berkey before Sharp had a volley that was deflected and it goes wide. And really, as the time winds down, it was clearly a low block that St. Louis were putting. They were trying to hang on to this lead, the Galaxy. I kind of thought they started becoming a little bit stagnated. I mean, they definitely put some pressure on the St. Louis team, but at least in the last 5 minutes, between minute 75 and 80, the attack kind of become a little bit stagnated. Though that being said, in the 82nd minute, they do get their equalizer that they've been looking for, and it's Billy Sharp scoring from Fagundes to tie the game up at two apiece. Low key, Billy Sharp coming to the Galaxy. That is definitely a really good move. I think it's a very underrated move for the Galaxy to bring in a Sheffield United legend, a guy that's scored a lot of goals for Sheffield United, both in the Championship, in the Premier League, and even in League One when Sheffield United was still there just a couple of years ago. But yeah, he scored here to tie the game up at two apiece. And they mentioned that's also the 15th goal that St. Louis had conceded in the final 15 minutes, which is the most in MLS, which I wouldn't have guessed that was the case because St. Louis, they have looked so good this season, but the thing is, in the final 15 minutes, this is when they have been very vulnerable, and a lot of that has to do, they haven't been conceding those goals when they're in a comfortable position. They're not like Columbus last season where they're just conceding goals at will when they're only leading by one and so forth. Though I will also say that I think 1/5 of those 15 goals that they conceded have came against Austin FC, because I think they conceded like three against Austin FC in that crazy game that we saw a couple of weeks ago. But Sharp did try to look to get the lead for the Galaxy, but he heads that one wide, and there was no doubt the Galaxy, they were not just satisfied with a 2-2 draw. They were pushing to trying to get this comeback win, and there was 9 minutes of stoppage time that was signal. But unfortunately for the Galaxy, they didn't really create too many chances in that 9 minutes of stoppage, as in the end, St. Louis, they hold on to win 2-2 in this one. The shots in this one, 20 shots compared to just 5 that St. Louis had. 3 shots on goal compared to 8 that the Galaxy had. 6 shots off target for the 2 that St. Louis had. 6 shots that was blocked compared to none that St. Louis had. And possession-wise, 70% possession compared to 30% possession that St. Louis has in this one. So this was another game where, when you look at the stats chart, one team dominated the stats chart, they don't get the win after the end of the game, and I think that's kind of frustrates Galaxy fans a little bit. I mean, yes, they did come back from a 2-0 deficit, but when you have a man advantage and the way that they play in this one, you would think that they deserve all 3 points, and especially there's really no room for error. Consider they are the team that is really, I would say, that considered to be the last team that is still have a real shot in terms of making the playoffs. Well, actually, if your name is not Colorado, you pretty much will always have a shot in terms of making the playoffs. And again, this is no offense to Colorado Rapids fan, but you know where you are in the standing. They're not making the playoffs. But pretty much every team is in it, and that dropping these points at home, it could come back to haunt this Galaxy team. But for St. Louis, again, I said that they're also not happy in terms of how this result would come out, because again, holding on to leads has kind of started to become a little bit of a problem for the St. Louis side. And again, that 15 goal that they conceded in the final 15 minute, that is alarming. I mean, this I know, like I said, most of them came when they're relatively comfortable, and they just kind of concede a go to that ruined Roman Burke's clean sheet. But still, that is still way too many goals to concede in the final 15 minutes if you want to consider to be a team that can go deep in the playoffs. And especially the other thing for St. Louis that they have had problem this season is the road form. There's only 3 games this season that they have won on the road, and again, I kind of a little surprised to see that this team has struggled on the road this season, because the way that they play in this energy drink soccer kind of play that Bradley Carnell implement, it fits perfectly if you're the road team. But yet they've been struggling this season on the road, and they aren't able to figure it out. I mean, the only good news I would say for St. Louis is that at least if they do finish the season at the top of the Western Conference, they wouldn't care about the road woes, because they won't really be on the road unless they're playing in that first round matchup where it's like the best of 3. But still, they're gonna have the home field advantage throughout, at least until when we get to MLS Cup, where they could still have the home field advantage as long as they don't face against Cincinnati. And yeah, again, I think that they'll be frustrated that they didn't get all 3 points in this, but at least they got themselves a point and they still maintain a really good position. I mean, they have an 8 point gap between them and Seattle, unless they absolutely collapse in the second half of this or in these last couple of games. I think St. Louis probably have that top spot locked up in the Western Conference. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of looking at all of these games from match week number 31, this mini kind of match week, doing all these games that is happening during international break. Hopefully by the time when we get to the next match week, most of the players will be back in terms of international duty. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys do like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this game. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.